Live pre-race. Formula E, the ABB Formula E season is back. Season 11 is about to get underway. Edward Hunter from Formula E joins us today. I'm Joe Samaniego. A big thank you to our Patreon investors, calling the show Mark, Robin, David, and Matthew for investing in the Grid Network each and every month. Your investment keeps us on the air. Link in the video description to invest through Patreon. We also appreciate one-time investments through Buy Me a Coffee and YouTube Super Chat. We'll thank you on the air. Edward, let's get right into it. Practice 1, Oliver Rowland was the fastest ahead of teammate Norman Nato, Jake Dennis second, and Eduardo Montoya, that Mahindra in fourth. I was thinking, this could be really exciting to see what happens. And we also saw the young Taylor Bernard, the rookie. He was the fastest in fifth, fastest rookie. But you have Pascal Wehrlein in ninth. Behind him, teammate Antonio Felix Acosta. Mitch Evans was sixth. Nick Cassidy 10th for the Jaguar team. And Robert Fries 7th with the Envision team. Of course, they have the Jaguar powertrain. Second practice, Jake Dennis, Acosta, Roland Wehrlein, and Evans. But then qualifying came around, and we saw Pascal Wehrlein prove why he is the defending champion. Goes out there, takes pole. But what I really found amazing, Ed, 3 different powertrains in the semifinals. We had DS, you had Nissan, and of course the 2 Porsches. Do you see a potential gap between the Porsche and the Nissan powertrains?
Yeah, it was certainly an interesting qualifying session, and that we've got 3 very, very closely packed in manufacturers. Of course, we'll talk about Jaguar. They seem to have a very Saz is here too. Hey, but yeah, she's seen this shot a couple of times before of just me in my bedroom. But anyway, okay, that came out wrong. But interesting way to start the show. But anyway, where was I? Oh yeah, DS, Nissan, and Porsche. So all of them made it through to the duels. Porsche, of course, have got a lot of horses in the race, essentially, in that they've got the factory Porsche team, they've got the customer Porsches in the Andretti, and they've got last year's hand-me-downs powertrains in the back of the Cupra Kiros, essentially, which, of course, qualified just outside the top 10 in the form of Dan Ticktum, I think, in 11th on the grid. But yeah, Oliver Rowland certainly did what Oliver Rowland usually does, which is outperform the Nissan quite significantly, especially in qualifying. He always tends to take a lot of risks, and it paid off today with him getting all the way to the final and just beaten, of course, at the end, quite narrowly as it happens, by just under a tenth of a second in the end. It ebbed and flowed across the lap, but Oliver Rowland did just miss out in the end to a brilliant Pascal Wehrlein, who, like you said, picked up where he left off last year. He had some brilliant poles last year. Mexico, London, a couple others come to mind as well. And that qualifying pace has always been there. It's a format that really plays to Pascal Wehrlein's strengths, and Oliver Rowland's too, to be fair. So it wasn't a surprise to see those 2 make it to the final. Certainly Jake Dennis losing out in his Andretti Porsche to Oliver Rowland by a single thousandth of a second was incredibly close in the sort of quarterfinal. But for 1,000th of a second, it could have been Jake Dennis facing off against Wehrlein, and we could have had an all Porsche powered front row. But certainly, it's a positive result for Nissan. But we saw Norman Nato a little bit further back outside the top 5. I think he was 6th on the grid, if memory serves correctly. Behind, so he starts behind Da Costa in the second of the Porsches, and Maximilian Gunther in the highest of the DS Penske's, of course. So Gunther also having a very strong first showing for his new team. Although, of course, it's the same powertrain that he used last season with Maserati, so he's not a complete stranger to it. But of course, DS Penske, a very, very different outfit to Maserati MSG Racing, of course. So positive signs for all 3, but Porsche very much on top. Pascal, and there was a very interesting call just after the quarterfinals from the engineers to Pascal Wehrlein on the radio, where they said, try and cool the tires down before the final, which was very, very interesting because, of course, he started the final, lost a couple of tenths in the first few corners, but those tires held on a lot longer. By the time Oliver Rowland got to the end of the lap, the rears were just spinning all over the show, and he just about got it over the line. But it was that penultimate corner where memorably Sam Bird passed Mitch Evans to win earlier this year, not last year, but last season, of course, in the McLaren. And that was really where the time just ebbed away a little bit for Oliver Rowan. He had a little scruffy middle sector as well, but that was really the thing that just cost him those first 3 points of the season, of course. So Pascal Wehrlein picking up where he left off, and it's up to everyone else to try and take advantage of what's going to be almost certainly a very energy-saving heavy race in terms of the peloton effect that we're going to see, much like the last 2 seasons in Gen 3 that we visited the Sambadrome in Sao Paulo.
Yeah, the peloton effect is going to be really interesting to see how this, and of course, this race last year, as you mentioned, that last lap pass, the team is half the notes. I'm really interested just to see, now that it's a different time of the year, if we're going to have a difference in how the race plays out. But that peloton effect, I think, still might be very key in getting the win. As you mentioned, 3 points for the polls already. Pascal Wehrlein leading the point standards. Of course, one of the big things last year, Jaguar, they won the teams and manufacturers championship in Formula E. But when we saw them knockout qualifying, no Jaguar powertrain drivers in the knockout stages of qualifying today. Nick Cassidy is going to be the highest, starting 10th. Buemi Fringe, 12th, 13th. Of course, they're with Envision, who uses those Jaguar powertrains. And Mitch Evans, brake issues, came to a stop very early in qualifying. They even get to set a lap. He was going to be 22nd today. Are you surprised by Jaguar's performance, and can the drivers race towards the front to score those valuable points?
It's certainly possible. The pace, I don't think the race pace at least has disappeared overnight or anything like that. But you could tell Nick Cassidy wasn't quite happy with the way the Jaguar was handling, and it was pretty marginal. I think less than a tenth in it between getting into the top 4 into the duels and just missing out to, I think it was the Costa, if memory serves, that he just, or it might have been Verne. It was one of the two in that group essentially that he was just behind. I'm pretty sure it was Antonio Felix da Costa, but yeah, Nick Cassidy, of course. That consigns him basically to start just inside the top 10, of course, which is not a disaster. He's won from outside of the top 8 before, even at places like Monaco, of course. So you think the efficiency of the Jaguar is really, really going to come in play in the race, especially once energy saving becomes a major factor. But yeah, Mitch Evans was a big surprise, of course, having that brake caliper. So what essentially happened was, ahead of season 9, because originally when the Gen 3 car was introduced ahead of season 9, the idea was there would be no rear brakes. The braking would all be done on the front axle essentially. And what this led to was a couple of issues, because in pre-season testing ahead of season 9, a lot of the Jaguar powered cars were having the throttle stick open essentially. So that led to a couple of big accidents for the Envision and the factory Jaguar team at Valencia. And so they introduced this emergency system where the rear brakes, the emergency brakes that are not used unless there's a major issue, will engage. And so what essentially happened was Jaguar had to keep resetting all the systems on the car, literally the turn it off and on again approach, so that Evans could try and crawl at home. The problem was the rear emergency brakes would keep engaging and they'd have to repeat the process. So that's why Evans ended up having to pull off circuit, according to race director instructions. And I think he's still under investigation for that. Not sure what penalty they can give him other than disqualifying or not allowing him to start the race, which would be harsh because his free practice times, I think, would be enough for, force majeure to sort of come into play and sort of extenuating circumstances, because as long as they can fix the car and as long as the rear brakes aren't suddenly going to engage, then he should be able to take the start from the very back of the grid, or indeed the pit lane if he chooses to do so. But yeah, it was a big shame for Mitch, because we were saying in commentary that the second group had a lot more rookies in it. The Evans and Wehrlein were the two clear favourites to get through there, and Mitch Evans, we won't get the chance to see how quick they could have been in qualifying, but of course, still the race to come, still plenty of opportunities. As for Envision, it's a continuation a little bit of they were sort of just middle of the pack. They looked a little bit like they might have been able to challenge, but neither Friends nor Buemi quite got the lap together. So yeah, the Jaguar powertrain under-delivering in qualifying on this occasion, but certainly come the race, I'm expecting them to work their way back into the mix. This is exactly the kind of race that Cassidy in particular excels at. And he's looking to sort of redeem himself. If you remember earlier this year in the 2024 Sao Paulo E-Prix, Cassidy crashed out, bent his rear axle. The rear wheel was just knocked off completely, I think. And he ended up having to retire. So after nearly winning it the year before and then having that happen to him, Cassidy is very, very desperate to make amends, especially after a poor qualifying. So I think we're yet to see the best of him on this race day. And I think that I would expect some fireworks from Jaguar because they're not going to take the sitting down. Oh, and Mazra Khan's here too.
It's great to see folks in the chat room. Of course, share your predictions, questions with Ed and I on the air. Happy to post them and just chat about those as well. When it comes to Jaguar, Ed, you bring up Nick Cassidy, and I feel this is one driver I almost might feel a little bit of pressure, like I need to come out strong after what happened at Portland last year, where he had the lead, lost on the last lap, and then it just seemed the championship slipped out of his hand.
Yeah, in London, it was the same as well. He got the puncher while he was
Yep.
in a potentially championship-winning position, and there was also obviously the lingering discontent within Jaguar. Mitch Evans not being happy that he sort of was told by the team to help Nick Cassidy, and then by the time Cassidy got the puncher, Mitch Evans wasn't in a position to take the title himself effectively. So there were a lot of people quite rightly accuse Jaguar, I think, of fumbling the ball essentially. And it's always a problem when you've got two drivers competing for the title. They end up sort of taking points off of each other, putting each other under pressure. And it can be the best thing for a team because it can sometimes, bring the best out of the drivers and the whole team as well. But it can be the worst thing because it leads to a little bit of intra-team rivalry. Even if you're the best of friends off track, like Mitch Evans and Nick Cassidy basically grew up together there can be that friction there. So obviously they're starting at different parts of the grid today. So it's unlikely that they're going to come together, but you never know. Certainly, I think Mitch Evans will just be hoping for some reliability because it's been a little bit of a theme with Jaguar as some of the first races. You think back to season 9, Mexico, Sam Bird basically had the car shut down on him several times. Of course, that was after all that unreliability they had in preseason testing. But I remember we had Mark Preston, who's obviously involved in the technical side of the Lola team that's joining the championship this year. Mark Preston returning after 2 years away after winning championships with Techeetah, and he basically said Jaguar really should have caught that issue on the rig and that it was sort of unacceptable, that it would never happen at his team. So far Lola has been very, very reliable. So Mark has been as good as his word. But more issues at Jaguar, and they need to get on top of that. I think they'll just be hoping if they have a clean race, Mitch Evans can maybe score some points. But Nick Cassidy's got a much better chance of winning, I think.
Yeah, Nick Cassidy, I think, has a good shot of winning it. Just the pressure, that's going to be something. I think if he could keep it cool, calm, collective, and just work his way towards the front, he'll get there. Mitch Evans, 22nd. He'll need, I think, safety cars dropping out, a big one, as in a big crash, and avoiding it to get near the front. Tough road ahead for him. Mitch Evans, of course, the two Jaguar drivers, hoping to get a driver champion. Of course, Jaguar, they'll love to get another teams and manufacturers championship. And that's what Nissan, their two drivers, are going to want to do, try to deliver some championships. Nissan, both drivers made it to the knockout stage, but the team of McLaren, Neo McLaren, who uses powertrains from Nissan, 16th and 17th, Sam Bird, and then the rookie Taylor Bernard after replacing Jake Hughes. And Taylor had a great first practice. So I don't know about you, Ed. I was really shocked when qualifying came around. It was like, where's the pace of him and this McLaren team? How challenging is going to be for the two drivers to score points today?
Yeah, it was a little bit. I think Sam Bird was a bit more surprising to me. Taylor Barnard, he was affected by the red flag because his group was the one where Evans crawled to a halt with his rear brake caliper issue. So, and the thing is, Taylor Barnard and Zane Maloney in the Lola, they both set laps just before that red flag. So that meant they had kind of done their push lap and sort of put the tires through a sort of a heat cycle before the red flag. So obviously there was a bit of chance for the tires to cool down a bit during the red flag if needed, but sort of at that point, they were off sequence compared to everyone else, and you could tell they didn't improve their times later in the session. So I think Taylor Barnard was a little bit unlucky, and he's still a rookie as well, just like Zane Maloney. So he's still, even though he scored points in Berlin last year, filling in for Sam Bird when he injured his hand, Taylor Barnard, you sort of got to, obviously, formally you're there and you're there to deliver, but I think there were extenuating circumstances for Taylor Barnard. Sam Bird had a good first couple of runs, but couldn't quite match the pace of, I think it was Roland that was in his group in the factory Nissan. So yeah, McLaren not quite nailing it in qualifying, but we saw they qualified bottom end of the duels last year and were able to win with aggressive strategy and a well-timed safety car playing in their favor. So McLaren, I think they'll take a bit of heart from that, but they have given themselves, much like Envision, much like Mitch Evans, lots and lots of work to do, lots and lots of cars to clear. But certainly there will be opportunities if they play their cards right. So yeah, I don't think McLaren are completely consigned to not finishing in the points today. I think it's just going to be harder to do so.
Much harder to do so. Again, way back there. This track we do see passing. It is possible. Formally, it's very unpredictable, but I just feel if you're towards the back, you got your work cut out compared to if you're the front, and especially with Pascal Wehrlein, Jake Dennis up towards the front. Oliver Rowland, he's on the outside of row one with Pascal Wehrlein. Jake Dennis, I mentioned, he was a prior world champion. Of course, now Pascal Wehrlein, the defending champion. And you have Maximilian Gunther in fourth. Great effort for him. And of course, that team he is with. The race start, I'm wondering, it's going to be a little bit different because for the first time, we're going to see the front powertrain be used, activated. And of course, this front powertrain is going to be activated as well for the attack modes throughout the race. Do you anticipate this front powertrain to introduce a new twist to the start and attack mode?
It was, the theory is it should make attack mode more powerful. It certainly was spectacular to watch in the duels because it really improved the lap times noticeably. In terms of the attack mode was already somewhat effective, as we saw last year in Sao Paulo, certainly more so than in places like Mexico City, where basically nobody wanted to use it if they tried to get it out of the way as soon as possible there, because it would just lead to the rear tire spinning up. Of course, the front powertrain's always been there, and it's been used to sort of regenerate energy under braking. And now we're finally going to get to see its deployment capabilities as well, which is really, really exciting because it's Gen 3 delivering on what was promised when it was first pitched and introduced a couple of years ago to replace Gen 2 effectively. And of course, we've got Gen 4 in the background in the works too. It's certainly going to make attack mode more interesting because there might be a couple of teams that do decide to save it for later on and wait for everyone else to use theirs and then try and chew through the pack, especially if they've saved energy as well on top of that. That you might see a few late charges, especially someone like if say Mitch Evans can't make progress early on, he might switch to that sort of strategy. Of course, you mentioned it's a slightly different time of the year to when we last raced in Sao Paulo, and of course, temperature is could be a big factor because one of the things that won Sam Bird the race last year was the fact that Mitch Evans' powertrain was overheating and sort of started to derate. That it wasn't he didn't have as much usable energy to deploy. It wasn't as effective as he hoped it would because the powertrain, it was literally just overheating the motor in the inverter, so it couldn't deploy in the way that he needed it to in those final couple of laps. And that was what allowed Sam Bird to strike because the Nissan was holding up better in those conditions. So certainly this is a circuit where Jaguar had been strong when Nissan were especially strong last year with both Sam Bird in the McLaren and Oliver Rowland in Nissan making that late double move in the final corner to snatch a final spot on the podium. So yeah, attack mode is certainly going to be exciting, add a new dimension to the race. We've obviously got the pit boost, formerly known as attack charge, that's coming in the double headers later in the season. I think Jeddah is the first one in Saudi Arabia. So we'll see some tests before then, but we won't see it in racing conditions until March at least next year. So we got that to look forward to as well. But yes, having the all-wheel drive there, it certainly made qualifying really, really close, really, really exciting, because that was the only time they got to use it up until the race. So, yeah, you could see some of the rookies making mistakes or sort of just struggling to get used to the power, whereas some of the more experienced drivers will anticipate it in advance and plan their strategies around it. So that there's a lot to keep in mind. There's a lot of different things to keep in mind. Don't forget those tires as well. We are starting to see tire wear become a factor in Formula E, funnily enough. No tire changes, of course, but if they were degrading in qualifying over the course of one flying lap, they've got to get them to the end of the race as well. So we could see some drivers taking it easy early on, so they got some tire to race with later on as well. So it's all about resource management and using it at the right time in the most effective way.
I'm glad you brought up the tire management, because that's what I was thinking of, especially with the front tires now with the power to make the grip, how much that's going to be wearing out on it. And like you said, there's no pit stops. You got to make these tires last the entire race. I'm curious if maybe of a driver's thinking, okay, I'm going to save the tires, save everything, and try to get attack mode much later. But then there's always that risk of the safety car comes out or something occurs and you get a penalty if you don't complete the one or two attack modes. So it's going to be really interesting to see how this is all going to play out. Of course, that's one of the new changes. Some other changes, and of course, especially with the drivers from silly season, Stoffel Van Dorn now with Maserati, MSG Racing. Jake Hughes is his teammate. He replaced Jehan Daruvula in Maserati. Norman Nato back at Nissan after replacing Sasha Frenstrand. Nato's seat at Andretti goes to Nico Muller. Zane Maloney Yamaha Lola. McLaren, they got, of course, rookie Taylor Bernard, and we have three rookies in the field. They're all starting to horse back, with Bernard with McLaren, Maloney with Lola Yamaha, and Becken with Kiro Cupra. Out of those pairings, we got some pairings of familiar faces and new teams, and also rookies. Which one do you believe will have the smoothest transition, in your opinion?
Well, the ones that have been in Formula E longest have probably got a better chance of transitioning anywhere because they've got a transferable skill set, to put it mildly. I think Norman Nato will have the smoothest transition of anyone because he's driven for Nissan before. So he knows the team incredibly well because he's basically only been away a season. I suspect that Van Dorn, also at the Maserati, it's the same powertrain that he was using at DS Penske. So I think that's also quite likely to go well. Taylor Barnard has been bedded into McLaren team quite deeply. Like I said, there were extenuating circumstances why he didn't qualify particularly well. I think he'll probably have a better race, especially if him and Sam Bird work together, which I suspect they will. Zane Maloney with the Yamaha, we did an interview him with Formula E Zone magazine, and basically he admitted a lot of what they're doing this season, it's not just delivering the races, there's a lot of development work to do as well. So as long as he's getting good data that can make the Lola a much stronger car down the line later in the season, then it's not necessarily about results for him. It's about getting the maximum that the package is capable of, and giving good feedback to the engineers and sort of applying that in the way to make the car better. And then we go David Beckman in the Cupra Kiro. Again, I've one that had a little bit of a tricky qualifying, but of course, it's only really his first full season. It's his third start because he did the doubleheader in Jakarta a couple of years ago in place of Lotter in the Andretti, where he was sort of middle of the pack, not too impressive, but he certainly had some good times in testing Harama, and he's bedded into the team well. There was a little bit of controversy because Sergio Sede Camara, who used to be in that seat when the team was called ERT, gave an interview because he's joined Nissan as development driver, and Sede Camara gave an interview where he said something along the lines of that basically he was really disappointed with the way ERT/Kiro handled the whole thing because he felt that basically it was really unprofessional to basically not tell him until really, really late on that he wasn't being held on. In fact, their solution was just not invite him to testing. They didn't announce their lineup until a couple of days before the actual race itself. And publicly, Alex Sui, who's the team principal, I think, said, oh, well, Porsche had no influence on the driver decision. But we all know David Beckman is one of the drivers, and the fact that it's got Cupra stickers all over it, which of course is one of the sub-brands of Porsche, part of Volkswagen Audi Group, has not done a lot to dissuade those rumors. But yeah, David Beckman, I think it could take a couple of races to get the best out of him, but I think there's potential there, and I wouldn't write it off just yet. He had some good performances in FIA Formula 3 as well on the sort of F1 junior category, where he was winning a couple of races. Very good in the wet, actually, Beckman. So I'll have to see if there's any wet races or not. But yeah, I think all the rookies are pretty good. Obviously, a little bit of a shame to lose Sasha Fenestras and Jehan Deruvala as well. Fenestras particularly, I think, was quite keen to continue at Nissan, but didn't have a very good year against Oliver Rowland last season. So, well, hopefully we see him back in the future. Nico Muller was a little bit disappointing in qualifying, with Dennis just getting on the front of the second row. And I think Muller is way down the field in sort of 18th or 19th or something like that. So, yeah, Nico Muller, who was my pick for the title when Jacques Gianamana asked me on the Formula E Zone show, needs to sort of step up his game a little bit, because I don't want a repeat of the Robin Freins scenario last season where I predicted Freins to win, and he ended up having a really, really tricky first 3 quarters of the year before finally getting it together at like Portland, where he got a couple of podiums. One thing we haven't really found a time to mention it, but I thought there was a very good qualifying from Eduardo Mortara in the Mahindra, which doesn't look to be the fastest car yet again, but he was able to get it into P7 just behind Nato and Da Costa effectively. So, and in front of John-Eric Verne too. So I thought Mortara really outdrove the car, a little bit like Oliver Rowland in the Nissan as well, but obviously with a slightly less competitive package than Mahindra. But of course, we know that team is still rebuilding for a couple of tough years, and this is sort of the middle year of the 3-year plan, I think, what team boss Frederick Bertrand keeps telling us. So we'll have to see. I think there's a good chance for Mortara to score some really handy points to start his season from 7th on the grid.
Yeah, Mortara, when he was fast in that first practice, I thought, could this be the Mortara we're sort of used to seeing?
The one that got pole in Berlin last year, yeah.
Berlin last year. And I always felt he somehow, it just seems he's able to get something more out of that car when he was with Venturi long ago. We know he was with that team for a long time. Maserati, a little bit of a struggle. If he's back, that'll be good timing, because, yeah, he's 7th place, where his teammate Nick De Vries, 21st. Not a good qualifying effort today. Nico Muller, 15th as well. So quite a far back in the grids. They're going to have some work cut out for them. With that said, we're going to have some work cut out for us now, because it's time for everyone's favorite game and one of the hardest games in the internet. Pick a winner leaderboard. It is blank, because this is the first race for the 2025 season. Of course, Matthew Bro got the 2024 championship, and we know a couple of years ago you were leading pick winner for like at least the first 3 months. Then NASCAR, everybody started taking over Formula E. The season ended early. So I gotta ask you, and we encourage everyone watching, comment in the chat room, who do you think is going to win the race? So Ed, I'm gonna start with you. Who is your prediction for winning the Sao Paulo E-Prix Formula E season opening race?
Oh, it is a tough one. My heart wants to go for Oliver Rowland, but my head, and that's the part I'm going to go for, is going to go for Nick Cassidy starting in 10th, because I think it feels like a sort of scenario where he always tends to come through and make the right decisions at the right moment. So I think if you have to put me on the spot, put me under pressure, I think I would go for Nick Cassidy out of the two. So yeah, I think he's going to win it for Jaguar, but I think it's going to be a crazy road to get there.
It's going to be something else, but I can see him doing it. He's great at the Peloton style races. I mean, really, we saw him. He used that to win in Portland 2 years ago. If he could get that momentum going towards the front, Nick Cassidy is a great pick. In the chat room, Mortara is a great driver. Hopefully he gets lucky today and gets some points for Mahindra. So we'll see if Mortara could get up there towards the front. For my pick, I'm going to go with the driver starting 5th place. He had some strong performances last year. Things didn't go out his way, but I think he's back. He's determined, and he wants to one-up his teammate on the pole. Antonio Felix da Costa is going to be my pick to win Sao Paulo E-Prix. Of course, those powertrains are looking really good. A good clean start, and I can see him getting to the front and hopefully taking the top spot in the podium. And with that said, we encourage everyone comment throughout social media. And of course, if you're not watching us live, you got up till the race start time to submit your comments on who's going to win and pick a winner. Matt White did the math. 199 races for 2025 for pick a winner. No bonus points this year. It's just straightforward. So somebody in there could score 199 points. The max I think anybody ever scored was Kobe, 60 plus points. And of course, Kobe, the 3-time champion, but Matthew Bro this year claimed the champion. Pick a winner, Jake Dennis. What do you think of that, Ed? Jake Dennis has a series pick a winner.
Yeah, I mean, he he does tend to do well in season openers, doesn't he? I think season 9 he won the opener in Mexico and then went on to win the championship. And then last season, I'm pretty sure he was he second behind Wehrlein? He was certainly in that mix. Oh no, he's a little bit further down the grid. He started like way down the grid out the points and then clawed his way into the top 10. I think finished P8 or P9 or something like that in the season opener last season, and then went on to win second race of the season in Saudi Arabia, I think it was. So yeah, he tends to start well in the season. Middle phase tends to be a bit rocky, and then he sometimes finishes strong. But yeah, it was good to see Dennis qualify much stronger than he finished last season. He had a horrible time. I was watching trackside. He had a really tough time in London. In fact, crashed right in front of the grandstand into Mortara, where I was standing in the final race of the season. So yeah, I think there's every chance Jake could win it. I think Nick Cassidy, in my view, is the one that he actually is. But yeah, I think I think your pick for the Costa was also a very, very good one. But yeah, I seem to be going with the only driver on the dirty side of the grid out those three. So we'll see how that works.
The Peloton effect, I think, is going to be really a big effect in this race. A lot of good picks. And of course, we encourage everyone, subscribe, hit the bell icon. We'll be back on the air tomorrow following the Formula One race to recap Formula One and Formula E. So hit the bell icon so you get the notifications, subscribe. And if you really like what you saw, consider investing into Grid Network on the show. Mark, Rob, David, and Matthew has invested in us. They allowed myself, Nicole Fry from Fans of Focus Motorsports, to be at the Portland E-Prix this past year. We're trying to get some folks to some races this year. Of course, Jackson Lambros did several races with Grid Network. So your investment does make a difference in helping us get to the track and giving opportunities to our team members. And of course, a big race weekend, Formula One's last race. So in about an hour's time, Grid Live pre-race for Formula One right here on the Grid Network. So be sure to tune in. Mara and Isha will be joining me to discuss the Formula One qualifying, of course, in the books. The race is going to be underway, but I think everyone's still talking about that George Russell, Max Verstappen feud. Can't miss that. And of course, Ed sporting the Penn State football during the championship game against Oregon, the Oregon Ducks. Of course, as everyone knows, Grid Network based out of Portland, Oregon. But we more care about motorsports. We encourage everyone, you're going to watch the game, have fun, and enjoy seeing two great college programs go at each other tonight, and some great racing today with Formula E and then tomorrow Formula One. One last comment in the chat room. Adam pick, he's also going with Jake Dennis. So if Jake Dennis wins, we're going to have two people potentially. And of course, Adam, one of our big supporters right here on the Grid Network. For Edward Hunter at Formula E Zone, I'm Joe Samriego. Thank you for watching today's program. We'll see you in an hour for Formula One's Grid Live pre-race.